Welcome everybody to the 2024 Continuing Education Credits Recorded Sessions for the Maryland and Delaware Master Logger Program. I'm John Hooven, the Master Logger Program Coordinator. Completion of all the videos in this series and the quiz associated with it will allow you to get 4 continuing education credits for your Master Logger program participation. This is the required university disclaimer guaranteeing your rights with regard to this program. Pursuant to Department of Agriculture, these are instructions to file a program discrimination complaint. As we start out this presentation series, of course, the first thing we contemplate is why are we here? That is, why are you here as a Master Logger looking to get continuing education credits? Before we do that, though, I'd introduce myself to those of you that I have not yet met and who are in the program. Again, my name is John Hooven. I'm stationed at the Y Research and Education Center in Queenstown, Maryland. My information will be provided to you at the end of this presentation. So if you have any needs, you can always feel free to reach out to me for any of your concerns regarding your Master Logger participation, continuing education credits, or if you know anybody who's interested in becoming a Master Logger who would like to be able to participate in the program. I am the Forest Stewardship Educator and the Maryland and Delaware Master Logger Program Coordinator for University of Maryland Extension. Before I came over here, I was the Project Forester for Somerset County, Maryland for Maryland Forest Service. I got my Bachelor of Science degree in Forest Ecosystem Science at SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, graduating in December 2021. And I've been down here in Maryland since 2022. So you, the Maryland and Delaware Master Logger Program participant, are adhered to certain principles of this program. They're based on core values of environmental regulations that include best management practices for forestry, for soil and erosion control, sustainable forestry principles, and industry-focused safe work practices. The program is endorsed by the State Implementation Committee of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. Becoming a Master Logger publicly demonstrates an understanding of safe, environmentally, and economically sound timber harvesting practices. The Maryland and Delaware Master Logger Program also works to raise public awareness of the professionals harvesting trees, one of the region's most important renewable resources. These are associated program sponsors of the project that include Delaware Forest Service, Maryland Forest Service, of course, the University of Maryland Extension, Maryland Department of the Environment, Maryland Forest Association, and as we previously discussed, the State Implementation Committee of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative for Maryland and Delaware. Master Loggers are required to acquire 8 continuing education credits every 2 years. That is 4 credits every year as a part of your participation in this program. Failure to do so will result in an inactive status If you're in an active status for a long enough period of time, then you will have to retake all of the 4 core programs. We'll have more information available to you with policy updates and changes that are coming sometime this month. So there are many ways to earn CEC credits for your participation in this program. You can check our website for online videos and webinars, and there are similar materials available by mail as well for those who are not able to participate online. But you must take a quiz for CECs related to materials by mail and also recorded videos. So these 4 recorded CEC training sessions are worth 4 continuing education credits. You must complete a quiz for credit. The QR code listed on the right-hand side of the screen here indicates areas where you can get more information on CEC credits, and also the website listed as well. When you see websites and QR codes listed on the screens of any of these presentations that are recorded, they will give you additional information when you use your smart device and take a picture of the QR code that will give you more information on the material being covered on that particular slide. That includes additional forms, regulations, and any other pertinent information that will be available to you that you will need to know to participate in the subject matter at hand. You can also see credits from online training from organizations where we have reciprocal agreements, such as Virginia Sharp Bloggers, West Virginia Extension, and also Pennsylvania. You'll see QR codes and web links, as I previously said, on all the presentations provided to you with more information on the topic. So here is our agenda for the 2024 recorded sessions. Each of these recorded sessions are in a playlist for you on YouTube. You should be able to go to the playlist, start a video, and each video will play in sequence. If you stop watching and leave the website, you should be able to continue where you left off when you return. The first session is the one that we will follow up with after this introduction. It is a recorded session on the northern long-eared bat listing update that we covered in the spring of 2023. The second session is a presentation on the trouble with oaks that is happening across the Maryland region and the Mid-Atlantic region. The third session is an update on invasive species, in particular with beech leaf disease and also the spotted lanternfly quarantine and how to obtain a permit for the quarantine. Lastly, the last session in this series, session 4, is a presentation on harvest benefits to wildlife, the benefits of clear cuts, thinnings, and crop tree release and slash piles for wildlife habitat. There is a 16-question quiz to be completed for credit for covering all of these recorded sessions. Participants need 80% on the quiz to receive credit. Participants may retake quizzes to achieve the 80% required. Quizzes are meant to verify recordings are watched and reinforce the takeaway message of each of the sessions. Complete watching all 4 sessions that include a session from the Maryland Department of Agriculture on the spotted lanternfly quarantine, And at the end, you will take a quiz, and the total of all 4 sessions and completion of the quiz is worth 4 continuing education credits. That concludes the introduction. Without further delay, we'll get started on the first CEC session, the Northern Long-Eared Bat Endangered Species Listing Update. This was originally presented live in spring of 2023 in areas across the state. If you missed those sessions, then it's a good thing you're sitting in on this one. But if you did attend those sessions, there's additional information in this presentation that was not available to us at the time of the live presentation. So it may be worth your while to watch the presentation for the additional information. Again, this is being presented to you as a 2024 Continuing Education Credits recorded session. So this is the Northern Long-Eared Bat, Myotis septentrionalis. This is a bat that occupies our woodlands. Anywhere that you have forest interior dwelling species of birds, phids, this is the same type of habitat that you would normally find the Northern Long-Eared Bat. Contrary to belief, bats are not flying rodents, though that is what they would appear to be. Bats belong to the order Chiroptera, which translated means hand wing. You can actually see that in this picture, that it looks like a big giant hand with webbing in between that actually makes up the wing. So once again, bats are mammals, warm-blooded, and they are the second largest order of mammals behind rodents, also known as rodentia. Bats are the only flying mammal, and their flying skills are superior to birds. Now I know what you might be thinking. You're thinking about flying squirrels, but flying squirrels are actually gliders and do not actually fly. Bats are present throughout the world with the exception of extremely cold environments. Bats have poor vision, but they are not blind. Bats rely on echolocation, which you can see the Northern Long-Eared Bat here has very large ears, very prominent, that help it to listen back to the echoes that it sends out as it's looking for food and looking to avoid flying into things at night. The frequency bats use for echolocation mostly range outside the range of human hearing. So as master loggers, it is necessary to be aware of rules and regulations affecting harvesting of trees in the forest, such as the case for rare, threatened, and endangered species. The purpose of this training is to raise your level of awareness of the background and possible impacts of the Northern Long-Eared Bat listing. So environmental regulations are one of the critical areas of sustainable forestry. And again, as master loggers, knowing your situational awareness is important, but not only just for your safety and your whereabouts, but also for legal purposes with regard to threatened and endangered species. Knowledge of environmental concerns is necessary to keep you at the edge of being on top of your game as a master logger. This type of training helps you to perform better in the public's eye, to be responsible, and to continue the understanding of harvesting with sustainable intention. So why exactly are we concerned about bats anyway? It's just a little bat, but though we don't usually see them. Bats play an invaluable ecosystem service that society and the environment are deeply indebted to. Bats are very important. They are pollinators and seed dispersers, and they actually, agriculturally, are very important for insect control. They also have similar benefits in the forest environment. It's estimated bats save farmers over $3 billion a year in pest control cost. However, these estimates could be as high as $53 billion a year, and they also apply to forest pests. The information from this research comes from the U.S. Geological Survey, and the information provided only looked at a certain aspect of the services provided to farms. That's why there's a difference there between $3 billion and the possibility of being upwards of $53 billion a year. They actually were looking to apply those numbers across the board to services that wouldn't normally be considered, and also, again, to the forest ecosystem environments. So bats play a very important role to these ecosystems. But bats, as we said previously, can also be important pollinators for some types of plants. Bats save farmers billions annually in pest control costs. Northern long-eared bat are a medium-sized cave-dwelling bat that live in caves when hibernating and can live in caves or under bark of certain trees when foraging in warmer weather. There are other cave-dwelling bats that are not migratory who also are in the region as well. Myotis species do not migrate. The bats hibernate during the winter, but they will forage out in the forest during the warmer weather. Winter hibernating areas are called hibernaculum. That's plural. The singular on that is hibernacula. So in warmer weather, the northern long-eared bat can live in forest, caves, or abandoned mines. Any one of those areas. They typically will live solitary except when roosting. And when roosting, what will happen is the bats will congregate together so that way they can raise their pups in colonies. It's acting as a protective mechanism so that the bats can look out for each other. Their foraging grounds could be woodlots, canopy, and the understory, open fields, over streams, and agricultural lands. Bats will roost when raising their young. The northern long-eared bat will seldom roost in structures such as barns and sheds. They're usually out in the forest, if not in dead trees, then they're under exfoliating type of bark, such as on shagbark hickory, certain types of white oak that have shaggy bark. Also, silver maple comes to mind. Any bark like that on trees that is exfoliating is where the bats are likely to roost, or again, in dying or dead snags in holes in the trees. So they like tree cavities. Artificial roost, but not with the long-eared bat. The long-eared bat will usually stay away from artificial roost. In season, when it's warm, solitary bats could conceivably still be found in caves and mines. Also cliff and rock crevasses, which we really don't have to worry about down on the eastern shore. Tangled hedgerows and thickets, under bridges, attics, and roofs. The typical roosting colony can be 30 to 60 bats when they are tending their young, and they usually will give birth late May through July. When roosting, the bats may move their roost and pups every 3 days or so. The important factor here is the element of disturbance. Disturbance will actually prompt them to move the roost as needed for the protection of their pups. It's more likely that a disturbance will prompt a move. Any move, but particularly a move prompted by disturbance, is likely to increase pup mortality either through predation by other animals or through other issues. The stress is just not very good for the raising of young. Pups start flying 18 to 21 days after birth. Roost colonies grow smaller as young bats start flying on their own. In particular, it's important to point out here that bats will only give birth to pups once a year when they start to be able to produce young. Northern long-eared bats in the wild can live up to 18-20 years. However, again, they're only ever producing one pup per year during that time frame. So it does take them a while to get a population back up after there's been a devastating event, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about coming up. So what exactly is the issue here? As we explained before, the listing of long-eared bat to endangered is important because of the effect that bats have on the agricultural industry and the forest products industry as well, as the bats actually take care of pests both in agricultural areas and in the forest. The issue is in fact fungus, which is known as white nose syndrome, and it's pictured here on a hibernating bat. You can see it around the muzzle of the bat itself and also at the end of the wingtips and also a little bit in its ear. What happens is the fungus causes the bat to wake up during hibernation. This makes the bat use energy stored as fat in their body that is supposed to help them to overwinter. As these stores of energy are used, the bat may wake up and go looking for food. Unfortunately, in the wintertime, they're not going to find any bugs at all. And in most cases, the bats will either starve if they don't find any food, or they may freeze to death as well. And as can be seen here, the fungus can cover the nose, the mouth, and the wings of the hibernating bats. The fungus is called Pseudogymnaxis destructans. Yeah, I really fouled that up. I hope you enjoyed me trying to say that. But that's the fungus that causes white nose syndrome. So the white nose syndrome impacts many non-migratory cave-dwelling bats in the genus Myotis, and also a couple other species of bats that are not in Myotis. These include already listed Indiana bat, the little brown bat, and the eastern small-footed bat. The fungus is native to caves in Europe and was thought to have been brought here by cave explorers. The first incidence of white nose syndrome killing bats was found at a cave outside of Albany, New York in 2007. You can see by this map here, any areas where the black is showing up are evidence of white nose syndrome from 2015 to 2022. Any areas in the slash are pre-2015 evidence of white nose syndrome. So you can see it's quickly spreading throughout the bat population across the United States. It was actually surprising that it's actually showing up now out west as well. The gray area in this map is the normal range of northern long-eared bat. White nose syndrome has spread to 38 states and 8 Canadian provinces. This is nearly 80% of the range of northern long-eared bat. White nose syndrome has caused declines of 97 to 100% of northern long-eared bat colonies. That is an awful high mortality rate. Studies have shown bats have a higher survival in areas where winters are relatively warmer or shorter. But you can see here, based on this map, that they don't get down much further south than South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. So there's none dwelling in Florida, for example. These are areas where the bats don't normally overwinter in caves, but tree cavities in wetland areas that have a tendency to also stay warmer. Here we have a picture of, this is a hibernacula. I believe this is actually taken from some people I know up in New Jersey with New Jersey Fish and Wildlife Service. This is a hibernacula up there, and basically illustrates, you can see if you look in the cracks, the brown areas on the inside of these cave walls are actually masses of bats that are hibernating, and the inset picture actually shows a close-up of the bats. You can see they all congregate close together when they're hibernating, and this is one of the problems of the spread of white nose syndrome, is that when they are grouped up close together like this, the fungus is able to spread through the population of bats relatively quickly. Caves and mines are suitable hibernacula, but they're relatively humid with a consistent temperature above freezing, which is also very beneficial for the fungus. Because bats tend to group when they're hibernating, again, the fungus spreads widely among them. You can see here on the right this picture of one bat that is totally covered by the fungus. Just an absolute horrible state for the mortality rate, of course, of white nose syndrome is the major cause of the reason why the bats are listed. However, it doesn't help that there are also other stressors that are adding to the species survivability, and this includes impacts to hibernacula, loss of habitat, and also wind farms. But these sources, in comparison to the decline by white nose syndrome, are much, much smaller than the impact of white nose syndrome itself. The problem is that when you combine the issues together, it's just not helping this species to recover at all. Although there's no significant population declines as a result of these other sources of mortality, they are now important factors affecting the bat's viability until we find ways to address white nose syndrome. Wind energy related mortalities are, of course, caused by the wind turbines that can kill bats by direct collision with turbine blades. They will actually shut down some wind turbines in areas where there is known bat activity to actually help out with bat populations. Mortality has been documented for northern long-eared bats, although a small number have been found to date. However, there are many wind farms operating within a large portion of the species range, and many more projects are planned in the future. Summer habitat loss is another issue. This can come from highway construction, commercial development, warehouses, for example, on agricultural areas, surface mining, and of course, wind facility construction that permanently remove habitat and are activities prevalent in many areas of the bat's range. Summer habitat loss may result in longer flights between suitable roosting and foraging habitat, fragmentation of maternity colonies, and direct injury or mortality as well. Winter habitat loss and disturbance. You can see here this picture where they put gates on the hibernacula to prevent people from walking in and disturbing the bats, but that gate actually impedes airflow, changes the airflow, and also can interfere with the bats going in and out when they're looking to overwinter there. So they can restrict the flight and movement of the bats. It also changes the microhabitat, as we discussed. A change of even a few degrees can make a cave unsuitable for hibernating bats. Also, cave-dwelling bats are vulnerable to human disturbance. Arousal during hibernation causes bats to use up their already reduced energy storage, which we discussed earlier, which may lead to individuals not surviving the winter. Climate change is also a factor. Changes in temperature and precipitation may influence the species' available suitable roosting and foraging habitat and prey availability. As seen from the map that we saw previously, as the species escapes the heat from climate change, that'll actually push them further up north. And again, that can change their foraging areas and habitat. Let's go over the Endangered Species Act. This is something that we're going to be continuing to focus on in future CEC trainings. So the Endangered Species Act has been in place since 1973. Since the Endangered Species Act, many notable species have been brought back from the brink of extinction. I show three examples here: the bald eagle, the whooping crane, and the Delmarva fox squirrel. They've all been delisted because of the activities that were done under the Endangered Species Act helped them out. You may remember at a time when we had to have a buffer area around an eagle nesting area. That was something that was done during the Endangered Species Act and restricted logging activities around those areas. However, it did not impede any harvesting in that forest. It only allowed that you had to have a buffer around the eagle's nest. And that's the type of thing that we'll be looking forward to in the future once Maryland Department of Natural Resources puts together guidance for the northern long-eared bat. You can see here the graph on the right. How well does the Endangered Species Act protect birds? After 40 years, 70% of listed bird taxa are actually better off than they were. 42% are increasing, 13% were delisted, and 16% were stable. However, 21% are still in decline. So the Endangered Species Act is something that helps endangered species, and that's why the northern long-eared bat obviously is listed. With regard to the whooping crane, interesting fact here that there were only 23 whooping cranes that existed in 1941. Since the Endangered Species Act was created, the whooping crane was on the list, and there's more than 800 in the wild as of 2020. The endangered status nullifies protections under the 4D rule from when the bat was previously under a threatened status. The endangered status under the Endangered Species Act assigns higher protection status, but also underscores that the species is facing extinction, even possibly with the intervention that's being done. The northern long-eared bat was previously listed as threatened in 2015, but that status changed as of January 30th of 2023. This slide has the reasonable certainty map provided by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The most significant point to the map is the hibernaculum locations indicated by the blue circles. The hibernaculums located in the center of those blue circles. Orange circles are merely areas where bat surveys have recorded northern long-eared bat in the past. The guidance for hibernaculum is 1/4 mile buffer from the hibernaculum at any time of the year. So basically 1/4 mile from any one of the centers of those blue circles are off limits to harvesting. As you can see from this map, the only known hibernaculum locations, there's a couple in northern Delaware along the Delaware River, and then out in Garrett County, Maryland, and also portions of Allegheny County. So with regard to hibernaculum locations, those are the only areas that are, again, 1/4 mile from the hibernaculum off limits to harvesting activities. The rest of the state, as far as that's concerned, if you're harvesting in areas where the bat is during a time of the year when the bat is hibernating, you should be good to go because there's no other hibernaculum locations across the state of Delaware and Maryland. Aside from the area east of Hagerstown, the bats appear to be traveling up and down in the Potomac River Valley during warmer weather. The guidance for known maternity roost, and those are the areas indicated by the pink circles, is 150 feet during the months of June and July. Bats can return to areas of known previous roost, but they do occasionally move their roost while they are rearing their pups. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, only federal work is currently impacted from their guidance. Maryland DNR is working on their own framework guidance for Maryland. Delaware is also working on similar guidance. However, the only areas of concern in Delaware may be in the northern part of the state. That likely is little forested anyway. There is interim guidance for non-federal government lands towards the end of this presentation. This flow chart here comes from guidance from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regarding federal projects. So when we're looking at this, the first key here is looking at whether or not it's a federal project or not. If it's not, the understanding is using the NLEB range-wide D key guidance. There's also some guidance at the end of this presentation with regard to non-federal lands that will be quite useful. The website listed in the lower right-hand corner, along with the QR code, is IPAC. Very good website to use with regard to looking for guidance with regard to species listed under the Endangered Species Act. So if you have any projects, especially federal projects, that you may need some information on, and even non-federal projects. The IPAC website is a good starting point. If you have any further information that you need assistance with, you can always contact the ecologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who are more than happy to assist you with any information that you need as well. This slide came from the federal presentation, just basically looks at what they call a take. A take is basically talking about in the Endangered Species Act, what happens when a species is impacted negatively by the activities that would result in either death or harm or a cause in its decline. So obviously we're looking at removal of occupied trees during roosting. That's a big one, of course, that can cause harm or death to pups and adults, and from predation, also from other reasons as well. And that's a major concern, is the removal of trees in maternity roosting areas. That would be a major concern. Of course, any roost trees that are removed during occupation are going to have a dramatic effect, especially in cold winter months as well. But this is basically referring more so to areas of the southeast coastal plain from the James River in Virginia south, because again, there's no hibernaculum caves down in that area, so you find that more than likely northern long-eared bat would be roosting in tree cavities in wetland areas. So that particular guidance would be more appropriate to areas to the south and wouldn't impact us. Disturbance associated activities with human activities, noise, exhaust, vibration, detonations, military aircraft, occurring during the active season that is significant enough to result in the northern long-eared bats fleeing occupied roost trees during the daytime. Again, these are all considered to be issues that could result in a take of northern long-eared bat. Now, this slide here lists additional stressors that may impact bats, but take is not necessarily certain to occur. So, of course, in those areas are removal of unoccupied roost trees during the inactive season, meaning the bats aren't there, but what if the bat comes back the next following season and finds that a roost tree it was using before is no longer there? Of course, it'll have to go finding another area to roost, not necessarily the end of the world. But it could reduce fitness by impairing the behavior, the patterns of the bat with regard to breeding, feeding, and sheltering. And of course, the removal of foraging areas in the inactive season can impact the bats, but again, not necessarily result in a take. The bats are basically flexible, and they've lived with disturbance since the beginning of time, since they first started hanging out in the forest. So it's something that they are able to get used to and move on. An important note here is the fact that not only northern long-eared bat, but also other species of Myotis are actually dependent on some disturbance to actually increase the amount of food available to them in these areas. That's something that there was a study done by SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry recently. That presentation is actually available through Cornell Extension's Forest Connect series if you're interested in learning more information about that. That's not to say we go out and cut down all of the forest to make more food for bats per se, but that is to say that management activities actually can help and be a positive thing for bats. That's not always necessarily a bad thing. It's just the idea is keeping in mind roosting areas, nesting areas of maternity roost. Those are the critical things that need to be watched. Of course, use of pesticides can temporarily impair behavioral patterns associated with feeding and shelter as well. Water quality alteration can affect the bats as well. And this doesn't really affect us too much, but work on bridges and culverts that are greater than 4 feet in diameter during the inactive season can actually affect the bats as well. Once again, coming from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's decision key and the interim framework for northern long-eared bat. When they talk about projects not compatible in the interim framework, these areas are just basically looked at as the exclusion areas. These are areas that you would definitely not be doing any logging work, any type of harvest activities, just based upon what you see here. So, like for example, you're not going to be a quarter-mile area away from a hibernacula, for example. Disruption and disturbance during hibernation. Once again, falling back into the hibernacula point, simply because these are cave-dwelling bats that hibernate in hibernacula. The last one on there, cut or destroy known occupied maternity roost or any trees within 150-foot radius around known occupied maternity trees, because once again, June 1st to July 31st, that is the area and time at which maternity roosting would be occurring. And once again, that is the buffer that would be allotted around maternity roost. Again, looking from that same presentation, projects not considered purposeful take of northern long-eared bat, meaning that you know are looking to deliberately take a northern long-eared bat. That goes without saying. I should think that they're endangered species, so you shouldn't be taking them under those circumstances. This is pretty much self-explanatory, but again, with regard to the work that you're doing in Maryland and Delaware, a lot of this stuff likely is not going to be applicable to you. So I came across this document preparing this recorded session series for you. This actually is in addition to the information provided that was in the spring 2023 live sessions, but this is new. The interim voluntary guidance for northern long-eared bat. The link to that document is on the right-hand side, and the QR code for the same. In a nutshell, the way this lays out and is worded, it guides you through actions and decision-making process that you would take in an area where you would be working that you may or may not have endangered species that you may be concerned with. So the first question you would ask yourself is, do I need a take permit to begin with? Now, you should know that under the Endangered Species Act, A take permit basically is a way of protecting yourself in the accidental. You've gone through all of the necessary steps that you legally need to take to avoid take, and as it happens, you take an endangered species, meaning you kill it, or you have actions that basically could lead to mortality or along those lines. That's basically what a take permit covers. So the question would be whether or not you're working in an area where a take permit is needed. So if you're doing work, say, on the eastern shore, and there's no known hibernacula or maternity roost around, then really the answer on that is likely going to be no. So you would stop right there. Now, if the answer would happen to be yes, you're out in Garrett County, and there are known hibernacula in the area, known northern long-eared bat in the area, then you would go to the next one, the possible presence at a given time. So, like, for example, here we're talking about you're not going to be harvesting within a quarter mile of a hibernacula, so you don't have to worry about that. But let's say, for example, you're working in an area where it's winter time and you're not near a hibernacula. Your likelihood of actually encountering long-eared bat under those circumstances is very remote. So once again, then you have to weigh that consideration as to whether or not the possibilities are there. That's basically what this is into. So again, getting a little bit more into it. So steps you should follow if a take is possible. Work during hibernation areas. So with the exception, of course, of the restrictions of known hibernaculum. So the idea is that if the temperature is below 40 degrees and you're working in an area that there's no known maternity roost and the bats are likely to be hibernating anyway, and there should be no likelihood of a take. That's one way to do it. The other thing is avoid harvest during the pup season, which they consider to be June 1st through July 31st. And again, just in areas where this could be a possibility. Also, number 3, I think, is pretty much tying in with number 1, working in areas where temperatures are below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, this guidance is only applicable to areas north of James River in Virginia, because south of the James River there is no hibernaculum. However, the bats do roost in the wintertime in snags, dead trees, tree cavities, and likelihood is it's going to be in a wetland area. So the idea there being that, if you're working in Virginia or south, then you can't, there's different guidance for working in those areas. So, and on that, basically it for this video, session 1. Please continue to watch session 2. At the end of watching all these videos, all 5 of the videos in this series for 2024 recorded sessions, there'll be a quiz that you need to take to get your credits for the CECs for this program. I thank you very much. If you have any questions, please direct them to me at the email address below, or you can also email Taylor Robinson. Thank you.